PlayStation VR2 is here, and we've been messing around with it. It's me, Jake Baldino, and we got a lot to say. We've been playing with this thing for a couple of days. We didn't get a review version or anything. I just went out and bought it, so this is just first impressions. I really like VR. I'm just putting my bias out there at the gate. If you've been watching our VR reviews forever, you probably know that. I've used for a decent amount of time most consumer-grade VR headsets from the beginning, so I'm not just some guy, okay? I'm a guy with a lot of credit card debt. Don't be like me. Anyway, PlayStation VR2, believe it or not, it's 6 years since the original, so a lot has changed technology-wise, and it's awesome. The only thing that hasn't changed is how you may feel about VR or how you may feel about plunking down a bunch of money for it. So it's complicated, but there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about, so let's just jump in. First, let's talk about the design of the headset itself. Now, this may have been a little bit of an unpopular opinion at the time, but I felt that the original PlayStation VR headset was one of the best designed and most comfortable ones. And once again, for us, Sony has continued that trend. The design and type of fit is fairly similar all around, and the headset feels light and not distracting or weird on your face. It's comfy, not a lot of light gets in, but you don't get super sweaty. The materials don't feel premium or super fancy and expensive, but at least they feel comfortable. My only complaint is that the kind of plastic rubbery gasket type thing that goes specifically on your face, once again, just feels really thin and floppy. On your face, it's fine, but just looking at it and messing with it seems like it might be breakable over time. Like super delicate. Now, the buttons to turn it on and stuff are underneath the eyes, and the focal length adjustment knob is on the top left. And the fit involves putting the ring over your head, sliding the actual face unit forward onto your face, and then adjusting the fit and tightening it up with a little kind of ring crank thing on the back. You plug in some headphones, either the sleek little earbud ones they package in or your own, and then you're good to go. Now, the cable, unfortunately, is permanent. You can't remove it and replace it or anything like that. And the quality of cable is very stiff out of the gate. It's like the kind you buy and it's perfectly rolled up, and then you can never roll it up that perfectly again. It's just a nitpick. Now, the Sense controllers, these things are absolutely awesome. They essentially took a PS5 DualSense controller and snapped it in half and put a little ring sensor type thing around it, and it's really good. They fit properly in your hand like a good modern VR controller. They're not heavy, and this is just a massive step up from the control option that we used on the PlayStation VR, the original one. You remember this thing? Really? See ya. They were terrible. They often lost tracking and relied on a charging cable you barely use anymore, but these are sleek, USB Type-C, and have all the buttons you need, including haptics and great triggers. Now, I had to get used to where exactly the X and O and triangle and square buttons were aligned. It kind of screwed up my brain for a little bit, but you get used to it after a while. The only thing that really bothered me is the placement of the strap. I think it should have been a little lower. It's a little awkward to put on. Once it's on, it's fine, but it's just a weird spot. Now, it's worth noting that there have been some reports from consumers and a couple of reviewers I know that some of the specific controllers have shown up kind of DOA, where the sensors aren't picking them up. It might be a software-related thing. I didn't have that issue in my experience. My controllers were good, but it's something worth at least acknowledging at launch. But these Sense controllers and the rest of the technology is where you really feel like this thing is a huge step up. This thing has all the proper bells and whistles of modern VR, and it starts with the setup. I mean, you're not juggling an AV box and multiple HDMI cables and things, or even the PlayStation camera. No, nothing. Everything is on board, and you just plug it in with one USB-C cable, and you're good to go. I mean, here, look at this. Look at the contrast between last gen and this gen on a table. I'm not shilling or anything. I am just legitimately fascinated at the jump in tech in 6 years, where when VR started, it already felt like this miracle that they figured out, and they've managed to streamline it and make it so much more user-friendly. So especially if all you've ever experienced is the original PlayStation VR and you haven't kept up with hardcore enthusiast VR stuff, this is gonna feel like a massive jump. The setup process is nice and simple, super quick, and the onboard cameras allow you to switch to seeing your space around you with little hassle. So you can grab your phone, pick up your controllers, move a chair out of the way, I don't know. This makes a big difference for awareness and safety when in-game too, and the room setup process is intuitive and simple. So you look around your room and the headset will analyze the room and the whole space, and then from there you can fine-tune it by tracing a little border on the ground. But the auto-suggest is really good, and even with the weird lighting and just random crap around our room and an ugly couch, it managed to pick everything up perfectly. Now, along with that, this headset takes advantage of eye tracking for foveated rendering, and does a great job of just demonstrating how it works to you as you set it up and adjust your focal distance. Now, Foveated rendering and just way better screen quality, OLED this time around, just makes an overall huge difference. The visual experience is great. It won't show up that well in videos of captured gameplay we have running here, but really, everything is crisp and bright and fairly sharp, and the screen door effect and God rays you always hear about with VR are minimal, and colors are pretty damn poppin', especially with how deep the black levels can be, but I assume that's just because of the OLED. Shout out to OLED. So hardware-wise, Sony has taken VR from something that they made work in the first gen to real, proper, modern, user-friendly VR here. I think VR lives and dies by how accessible it is, and other than it being connected by a cable, it's pretty flawless stuff. I only had the occasional controller tracking miss, that's pretty normal across VR devices I've used, and I've been in it for a few hours intensely without getting sweaty or weird or disconnecting. And anytime I need to untangle a cable or check on my cat or something, boom, just hit the little button for onboard cameras to see the world, and that's it. The experience is good, top to bottom. Now, what it all really comes down to, of course, is the games, which it's a bit more complicated. It may not be the easiest sell for everybody, but there's enough to dive into and talk about here. First and foremost, it's worth noting that not all PlayStation VR games are compatible with PlayStation VR2. Some have been updated by the developers, and more might be in the future, but don't expect a completely seamless library if you've invested into the original PSVR. The technology is rapidly changing, so compatibility is tricky. I'm the first annoying nerd to tell you that, but still, it stings. Especially when you couple that with the fact that there just isn't a Rockstar launch lineup. I'm not saying that there isn't a big lineup. I'm just saying none of it might not be the most exciting stuff in the world. There's enough to keep you busy, mind you, but some are older games or ports of meta Quest games, and your enjoyment is going to vary with some of the bigger heavy hitters. Horizon Call of the Mountain is the star of the lineup. I like it. If you've played a lot of VR games, it's not going to surprise you, but if you're new, this is a great entry point. It's pretty easy to pick up and play. The bow and arrow combat is simple, but actually pretty satisfying, and the game's main mechanic is climbing around, very much based off of the Oculus Climb game back from the Rift years ago, and it's satisfying to monkey around. Seeing characters from Horizon up close, especially the machines, is actually pretty awesome. They're really big. The game is pretty damn gorgeous looking, but actually features some proper video game mechanics, like collecting things and crafting things for weapons and generally progressing with new equipment. It's like a 6-ish hour experience depending on how you play, and the story isn't much, but it's a VR adventure, and there are tons of options for movement for you to get your sea legs settled. As you might know, VR isn't for everybody, and you might get motion sickness. You might fall in one of a couple of different camps. You might feel fine and be totally good, or like me, you feel a little motion sick sometimes, but you just adjust some options in games and power through it, or you might just be completely motion sick from the jump and never get into this stuff. Now, the technology, the way the displays work, and the tricks developers have come up with throughout VR gaming has made it more accessible and easier to get into than ever. And even if your little tummy is a little sensitive to this stuff, you got a better chance than you ever have. And Horizon and all of its different little movement options is a good example of that. Now, big AAA experiences like that are what a lot of people are going to want and expect with PlayStation VR 2, but I don't know how much of that you're really going to get. Sony definitely provided here and there last gen, but we only know of a few games on the horizon here really worth getting excited about as of right now. The indie experiences are great though. Don't miss Tentacular, even though it's from last year. It's fresh on PSVR 2. And of course, Tetris Effect. Then there's stuff like the Star Wars experience, which is a bit whatever, but it's worth noting that plenty of older stuff that was updated by developers from PSVR 1 to support PSVR 2 are good, like Pistol Whip. Now, the best thing PSVR 2 has going for it is how it unlocks new ways to play in games you already own, like, say, No Man's Sky, Gran Turismo 7, or Resident Evil Village right now. The developers updated these games to support PSVR 2 right out of the box, plug and play, and it's pretty great. Resident Evil Village feels like a different game, and it's more tense and scary, and also really challenging. Like, good luck. Some of the cutscenes or moments are a bit weird or awkward, but the gameplay seems so far to be pretty rock solid. And Gran Turismo 7 is definitely the one to check out. You can look at every car realistically modeled in VR, and it is such an experience. Now, of course, you know me, I had to check out the DeLorean, and having seen them in real life, it really feels cool in VR to compare. The sense of size and scale of these cars is great. And of course, Racing in VR is just fantastic. I'm excited to see people experience this for the first time. I've always said it. Even if you're not a big racing game fan, driving in VR is just such a good showcase for why VR gaming can be great. So, like any time you consider spending money on a VR headset, a lot of it comes down to being confident in investing in the future of the device. You know, hoping new cool games are coming. And like I said, Sony has shown a few, but there's also the reality of having stuff up front to play, and there's enough to keep you busy here. Not all of it is like Game of the Year material, but it is fun. It really comes down to developers dropping cool experiences or updating more games to support the new hardware. And the price for many right now and with this lineup is pretty steep. In the United States, it's $550 for the hardware, or about $600 for a bundle with Horizon Call of the Mountain. Now, in terms of VR gaming, that is cheaper than getting a high-end PC with an RTX graphics card and a high-end headset, but still, $600 is more than the cost of a PlayStation 5. So it's a heavy purchase. It's a big decision. And even the games themselves you also have to buy, and those aren't cheap. You might end up paying $40 to try something that ends up just feeling like a glorified tech demo. But speaking of that, Sony does at least provide a lot of demos for these games to try before you buy, which gotta commend them for that. I've said it many times before, but everybody's wallet's different, and with VR, you really gotta do your research and think about what you're buying into and what games you're really gonna see yourself playing for an extended period of time, really. Scroll through, take a look at the lineups, take a look at what's coming next, and think about whether or not this thing is really gonna sit and collect dust for you. You could be one of a bunch of different types of people. You could be someone who's into Pavlov, which I really appreciate that they have this on here as a PC VR person. You might just be somebody who wants to always play a new thing, experience a new thing, so you'll be cautious. Or you're going to be somebody that maybe just wants to occasionally escape into No Man's Sky in VR. The options are there, it's just up to you. Because bottom line, complications aside, the device itself is a great device. Like I said, I'm biased. I'm a VR enthusiast. I think there's a lot to have fun here, but the experiences may vary for you. But at the very least, if you do pick it up, you can know that Sony, so far, it seems like they haven't screwed up the hardware. It all just comes down to the library, and I can't predict the future. But that's the PlayStation VR2 so far. Some people I know, some people who watch the Friday show, I've seen the comments, you're very excited about this thing, so I want to know if you picked it up and what you're jumping into. Have you had any issues with the controller hardware problems? And of course, what games are you playing? Are you trying old stuff? Are you catching up with Pistol Whip or Moss or Tetris Effect or whatever? Or are you jumping right into Horizon Call of the Mountain to see Aloy in 3D? Let's talk about PlayStation VR 2 down in the comments. Hopefully this helped you out, informed you a little bit, helped your buying decisions. If it did, clicking the like button helps us out. We very much appreciate that. But that's it, guys. I'm Jake Baldino. See you next time.